Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Today we ask if it's possible to recreate and perhaps improve on an existing game. So before we get too far into things, remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. And make sure those notifications are turned on so you never miss future videos. So today's video requires a bit of backstory. First, I recently started trying to expand my knowledge in regards to random generation, specifically layouts for the likes of dungeon crawlers. And working on these projects reminded me of an older game I quite enjoyed, Forager. Now if you've never played the game, Forager is a survival/crafting game made with gamemaker. And the gameplay is a simple loop of mine, craft, and upgrade to mine and craft better. What's most impressive was just how it handled so much stuff on screen at once. So much so that a guest article was written on the subject of optimization for GameMaker's official blog. And this post in particular has a special place in my GameMaker journey. And looking back on it now, the article isn't revolutionary and it's purposefully surface level in describing its methods, but after reading this article years ago, it was like an awakening. It managed to put into perspective something that somehow got me to understand GML better. Also, fun fact, I was introduced to the Dracula IDE theme thanks to this article, and I've been using it ever since. So yeah, this thing was a pretty major influence. Anyway, we're about to get technical, so be warned. Now in the article, one of the things the author explains is instance calling. Their methods involve the usage of instance activations, DS lists, and arrays. And long story short, an instance is spawned and recorded to a list. Then those instances are activated and deactivated when necessary via said list. Now if you've been following the channel for a while, you know I usually do this with projectiles in our action games, which I call object pooling. So with the knowledge I have now, I recently went back and replayed some of Forager, and I think there are several ways that we could possibly not only remake Forager, but maybe even improve on the original methods. I say that with almost no confidence, but it seemed like a fun exercise, so we're doing it anyway. Also, quick note that I'll be referencing our previous dungeon crawler project quite a bit in this video, so a link to that video can be found in the description for anyone who hasn't seen it or wants a refresher. Now, our world is broken up into two 2D arrays, an island array for islands and a world array for the general world grid itself. These could definitely be one single array, but I'm already bad at math, so let's not make anything more difficult than it needs to be. Anyway, much like our dungeon crawler project, the island grid is generated with the starting island spawned in the middle of the world. Now for this project, we're going to try using as few instances as possible, so while a player object is spawned, the most important variables are stored in a separate struct. And speaking of structs, our islands are also structs. When an island is created, the landmass is generated exactly like they are in our dungeon crawler, the only difference being that we're not currently using any curated spawns. Instead, we're simply generating landmasses with randomized edges. And so finally, with the basics of islands done, it's now time to see if we can improve on the original Forager. And to start, all our buildables are stored in a global array of struct data for future reference. Each entry contains information for health, cooldown timers, and most importantly, widths and heights. And so when a building is placed in the world, another struct is then recorded to yet another array. This struct effectively replaces the need to create an instance object for our building. And on creation, its position is also recorded to the world grid, including how far and wide said building should span, making it a literal physical object as far as the game is concerned. Now, because we're using a mixture of instances and structs in this project, an entire ID system had to be created to streamline the process. So while instance IDs like our player work like normal, our ID check system also accounts for a custom ID system used for each building created, which, by the way, was a pain in the butt to create. Basically, the ID system checks if the provided ID is an instance or a struct. If it is a struct, it scours the list of structures to find that ID and returns its position in the array, thus making it usable. And because our structs are set up to use similar variables as instances, we can easily merge everything into the same functions, such as our depth system. Which, funny side note, working on this ID system made me realize just how flawed the original depth system was. And so even if this project ends up going nowhere, at least that depth system got an upgrade. Anyway, this ID system made keeping track of buildings extremely easy, especially when it comes to interactivity, which like our dungeon crawler, is all tile based. So for example, when the player wants to hammer a building to break it down, we do a check based on the mouse's position relative to the world grid. If that cell contains the ID for a building, we check the list for the building and target it for damage using another function. If the building has reached 0 HP, the building is completely removed from the game, including all traces of it in the array, tiles, and world grid. Again, all with the use of a single custom ID. So good. And that's what I was able to get done in time to make this video. A lot of technical work went into this, and I want to say that this should theoretically be better than using instances. Honestly, I'm working under the impression that by creating instances, you're creating objects with a ton of variables and features that you may not need. And since our structures are all tile based and don't need anything other than some variables to function, do we really need instances? I mean, this way culling isn't even necessary and everything can still function without constant callbacks and checks for objects that may or may not be activated. But again, I'm not entirely confident on this assumption. So if you have any better insight into the gamemaker, let me know. Either way, be sure to share any and all thoughts in the comments. I'd especially love to know if you guys would like to see more technical based dev diary videos. And finally, if you'd like to play some other games I've created, including a sweet Backrooms demake that does feature curated layouts created from images, or several other previous works featured on the channel, or maybe you even want early access to the weekly videos, subscribe to my Patreon. Anyway, with that said, brings us to the end of today's dev diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.